Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. I hope you guys are all still healthy and that you've got your food and a warm, safe place to sleep. We'll do our best to distract you from your problems for a little while, so get your popcorn ready and dim the lights. Today we've got two Dogman stories that are both quite unique, not only compared to the other stories on this channel, but compared to Dogman stories in general. If you're in the mood for something different, then you've clicked on the right video. Before we get started, may I introduce our magnificent executive producer for this show, who is the one and only Michelle Rich. Michelle Rich is there in the stitch, throwing the switch, keeping our lights on and our episodes coming out through her kind donations to the cause. Thank you, Michelle. We couldn't do it without your generosity. To become a Scary Stories executive producer like Michelle Rich, simply join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Besides helping us stay online, you get access to hours and hours of secret, uncensored Dogman stories that we could never run on this channel. Also, I would like to extend the same offer to anyone who might choose to become a channel member if that's possible. I don't really know how that will work yet. I would need some way to email you or send you a long message with tons of links in it. Hopefully I'll have that figured out by the time this airs, or within 24 hours of airing or something. Now that you've seen how little Bigfoots understand about the internet, we should jump quickly into our next story, which fortunately for me, takes place in the woods, and we call it the Alaskan Black Dogman versus Grizzly Bear Standoff. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story about Dogman, but it has nothing to do with the current crisis situation. It actually happened to me last year in the summer. I was camping in the Tanana Valley State Forest in Alaska, near the Tanana River, and it had been a strenuous and exhausting day. I crashed out thinking that I was going to sleep until noon the next day. I awoke to the strangest sound I had ever heard. I was still half dreaming as I sat up in my tent, the sound still reverberating in my recent memory. What was it? Then I heard a far more familiar sound, which was that of a large bear bellowing. It sounded very stressed, and I could only imagine what might make a bear stressed. I don't know exactly why, but I tore out of my tent, heading toward the sound, wanting to see what was making it. When I got close enough to the river that I could see it clearly through the trees, I saw that bear that I had been hearing. It was largely standing on its hind legs and braying at something on the far side of the river that was out of my line of vision. Something larger than a baseball spun through the air, whizzing past the grizzly, zinging into the woods and ricocheting to bounce only about 10 feet away from me. This was starting to get personal, and I wanted to know who had just thrown that. I was imagining some sort of forest troll out to bother the grizzlies just for kicks. It had to be a human because nothing else in the world that I know of could throw rocks that hard and fast. Another one whizzed past the grizzly, who shouted in anger. Whatever was on the other side responded with a roar so loud and forceful, it felt like someone was beating on my chest as though it were a drum. That was the strange noise I had heard earlier. Up close, though, it felt uncomfortable to experience, almost painful. It was like a lion's roar, and yet at the same time, nothing like it. I don't know how to explain it, except to say that it sounded like a monster. That's kind of the closest I can place the sound. It was as though it were a monster in a movie, and it was roaring or screaming. I risked being seen by darting out between two trees and looking. I was straight out looking for whatever had made that horrible noise. I kept seeing nothing, and then, as I ducked behind a big old tree, I saw a huge form on the other side of the river. I thought for sure that I had seen Bigfoot, but as I peeked back out to get a longer glance, I saw that the so-called Bigfoot was put together all backwards. The legs bent 2 different ways, and its head looked like some kind of proto-wolf, like what wolves must have looked like back in the caveman times, or maybe the dinosaur times. This looked like something built to live a long time ago in a very hostile, probably jungle environment. To be honest, that's sort of what Alaska can be an Arctic version of sometimes. I went into a daze of bizarre wonder that I could be witnessing what I was witnessing. There was a grizzly on one side of the river, and there was a dog-headed, bent-legged Sasquatch on the other. The Dogman was whizzing rocks at the bear underhanded that would zoom by probably over 90 miles an hour. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but they sure seemed fast. Seriously, that dog-headed man could probably make millions in baseball if they ever get back to playing. The bear was getting annoyed, and he surprised me and the Dogman both by charging into the water, right at the Dogman on the other side. I saw that Dogman jump in the air like he was going to run away, but then he got this strange expression on his face as he came down, and I saw him throw a rage fit and tear into the water himself. The 2 giant creatures met in the middle, and it may as well have been Old Faithful going off because all I could make out was white water and foam. The water's pretty wild over there to start with, but with those 2 behemoths churning it up further, you couldn't even see them through the crashing waves of the river. I felt very exposed at that moment, and I don't know why. I think I'm actually glad that I don't know why, because I think someone or something else had arrived on the scene and was watching me. I decided to go back to my tent and pretend I hadn't seen anything at all. Maybe if I pulled my sleeping bag up over my head, this would all go away. Hung out my food on a tree away from the camp and went straight back to bed after that. If either of those things smelled me and my food, hopefully they would be more interested in the latter. I couldn't sleep, and I even tried literally pulling the sleeping bag up over my head. After a while, I gave up trying and opted instead to close my eyes and listen to the night. I would want to know if my camp became invaded by that dog-headed monster, or the grizzly, or whatever that third thing was that I only sensed but didn't see. I thought I could hear something walking around, and so I listened more intensely. I was not able to tell exactly what I was hearing, but I was too frightened to stick my head out of that tent. When I woke up in the morning, the tent and the camp area were as they had been the night before. When I walked back to the trees, though, I discovered that my food was gone. I don't mean that it got torn up and devoured by animals. I mean that it just was not there anymore. And I took that as a sign that maybe I shouldn't be there anymore either. I got out of there, grateful that I only lost some food and nothing more, after surviving the Alaskan Black Dogman versus Grizzly Bear Standoff. I saw the ghost of half a Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Sometimes the stories our elders tell us sound crazy. Sometimes they really are. But other times, we're being presented warnings which we would be better off heeding. How can we tell when our aunts and uncles and grandparents should be listened to, or when they should be humored? How can we tell when they are being wise, or when we are being foolish? For instance, what do you do when your aunt tells you that she saw a Dogman, but only the upper half of it? I had an aunt I will call Aunt Harriet, after the old Batman TV series. My sister and I used to call her that as our private nickname when we were kids because that's who she reminded us of. She had outlasted 3 husbands, and by the time we knew her, she was in her late 60s. That was considered old back then, and Aunt Harriet had already started to show signs of the increasing eccentricities that can sometimes come with old age. We thought she was losing her mind. She appeared to be losing her health, and we didn't think she was long for this world. When she would tell us about the half a dog, we figured it was a sign of her end approaching. Cut to 30 years later, and Aunt Harriet was finally actually nearing the end of her life story. I spent a lot of time with her during that late period, and I was surprised to begin to realize, over the days and weeks, that her mentality, her memory, her awareness of current events, her ability to crack a joke and to laugh when others did the same. She was just the same in all these ways as she had been when I was young. She had not been beginning to lose her mind. She was just always an eccentric person. Nothing about her seemed insane or crazy to me at all. Well, nothing except for that weird story that she would tell about seeing half a dog walking around. It was more than one story, actually. I don't even know how many times she claimed to have seen the thing. I also don't really know exactly what she meant by seeing half of a dog. My mother insisted I not ask Aunt Harriet about it. She claimed she had been told by a mental health professional at the hospital to avoid the subject. Humoring her would reopen her delusional world of fantasy, and she would begin to lose herself in it. According to my mother, it was the avoidance of talking about the monster or ghost sightings that kept Aunt Harriet going, both mentally and physically. Mom felt that Aunt Harriet's robust health into old age was due to her keeping her feet on the ground and her head out of the clouds. When she would start to tell ghost stories, my mother felt her health would begin to decline, and she would begin to lose her mental faculties as well. I had no proof of this other than my mother's insistence, yet I still wished I could hear my aunt's stories and decide for myself. Shouldn't they be recorded for posterity? How could my aunt's stories of seeing something strange actually lead to mental decline? And especially at the end, when we all knew her time was short, what harm would there have been in letting her tell the stories one last time, with me being able to record them and study them later on? I would try to get up the courage to ask her about this kind of thing, but chicken out each time. One time my mother walked in as I was about to ask her, and then I felt guilty. One evening, when my mother wasn't around, Aunt Harriet began to talk spontaneously about her strange visions, and I just jotted down notes about what she told me. According to her, there is a creature in the woods near where she lives that forgets to put itself completely together every morning. Aunt Harriet said that this creature is a dog, but he is the most funny kind of a dog. He walks around with his head and his front legs held high in the air, she said, and he floats a couple or 3 feet off the ground. Just floats. Floats forward, hovers, floats again, whatever it wants to do, but it's just half a dog, and it's just floating there, never completing itself, never growing legs, never becoming whole. I asked her if she meant she was seeing a ghost or a spirit, and she said no. This was a real dog. It just forgot to pull on its bottom half, that's all. It just only exists in the halfway. I laughed, and she laughed, and I forget what we talked about next. I still didn't know what to make of it. I still had no idea if she was telling me about something she saw, something she imagined, something she hallucinated, or something she was kidding around about. I mean, I absolutely had no idea what category to place the half-a-dog into. After my aunt finally passed, I had some reason to be in her old home finishing up some of her business for her. As I was about to leave the place for the last time, I looked out on the yard and was overcome with emotion. So many years of memories. We live our lives, and if we're lucky, we become memories for a little while to get to live on just a little bit longer. Then, when those who remember us go, there was nothing left of us at all. It felt overwhelming to me, and I needed some time alone. When I had recovered some of my composure, I glanced outside, admiring my aunt's old trees for one final time, when I saw something moving. Inside them, something large. It caught my interest. But I also knew that my family was waiting for me outside and that it was time to leave that place. Still, I was curious, and I stayed there a while longer, watching, waiting for whatever the animal was to come out into view where I could see it. I thought it was a deer at first, but the coloring was so dark that it couldn't be. Then, I began wondering if it might be a cow of all things. It had been bent over, but when it stood back up, I could see that it was some kind of a canine-looking thing, like a black dog, but it was upright like a kangaroo. I could only see its top half as it was standing behind a bush. I was impressed that the dog stood like a meerkat in that way. I hadn't seen a dog do that before. Then it proceeded to do something far more impressive. That dog took a few steps forward, still standing upright. And now it was standing, fully exposed, no longer blocked by the bush. And yet, I could still not see any more of it. There was a dog, a black, long-nosed, very sleek-looking kind of a dog, and it was standing like a human being would, yet no part of it existed beneath its waist. I could see its tail, but I could not see the legs beneath that tail. It was able to move forward, stand still, anything that a creature with legs could do, yet its legs were invisible. To be clear, it was off the ground, the approximate height it would be if legs were there. It's just that they simply were not present, or at least not visible. This had to be the same thing my aunt was trying to describe to me and everyone else for all those years. This was the half-a-dog. This was the reason people thought she was losing her mind. This was the reason we all thought she was on death's door when she had actually been 30 years away from it. I was stunned. I had to show my family. I had to tell them, and I had to show them. I ran out front, and I got them. I dragged them to the back. Maybe all my screaming, maybe all their loud protestations were the reason that it ran away. But the half-a-dog was gone by the time we reached the spot I had seen it on. These days, they all treat me like I'm the crazy one now. They talk right in front of me about having me committed. They don't even care if I hear them. Now I know what it feels like. Now I'm the insane one, the burden on the family, the one about to lose his mind, the one at death's door. All I can say is, I hope I can bear the honor half as well as my aunt did. Every time I think about it, I'm equally amazed and perplexed. It was only the upper half. It did not appear transparent. It looked very real and solid, only it ended at the hip, and I saw no legs beneath it. It did not seem to notice me, so I don't know if I was watching a residual haunting, or a replaying of something that once happened there, or might someday happen there. Or maybe it was actually a living thing that just had invisible legs. I also don't know how I would ever know, or if there's really a difference. I tell you, sometimes thinking about it can make me feel as though I actually am going insane. Can you think of any explanation for how such a thing could have ever manifested or appeared to manifest? How could something walk around on legs that weren't there? Could there be a species of bipedal canine with literally invisible legs? Seems unlikely. Maybe it is a ghost, but in a case like this, I think it's valid to open up the question again as to what a ghost even is. If that's a visitation from a spirit, then a spirit of what? There's no upright walking dog in the fossil record that I've ever heard of. At least with Bigfoot we have the Gigantopithecus, but the only precedent for Dogman is in the mythological record, not the historical or archaeological or anthropological. All that I can say about it is the truth. But in this case, the truth makes me sound insane. Because the truth is, I saw the ghost of half a Dogman. And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.